Activism in the Tamil and Malayalam literary sphere. So the coordinator of the panel is Professor Sujata, faculty CSSS, JNU, and we have with us as the chair Dr. E.V. Ramakrishnan, and as the panelists we have with us Dr. D. Ravi Kumar, Dr. Sunil Krishnan, Dr. Katisa Mamtaz, and as discussant we have Ms. Aparna Dikshit. We are pleased to have all of you with us, and we are looking forward to an interesting discussion around the theme. Now I would like to hand over to the coordinator of the panel to introduce the panelists and to introduce the concept. Ma'am.
Thanks, Tushala. And it's a pleasure to be organizing this panel. Even the process of talking to all the panelists and the chair and arranging this has been a pleasant experience. This theme very close to my heart. And it is nice that we are able to organize this under the creative theory colloquium. And though this and in all these 2 days of the colloquium, we have been discussing various themes: ecology, capitalism, war, oppression, name it, mostly from the viewpoint of academic social sciences. But there's a lot of thinking, new ideas coming from the literary sphere, and the literary imagination is rich and vibrant. That it casts these realities in a very beautiful language. So it's imperative that social sciences should have a more creative and synergistic relationship with the literary field. And it is with this idea that this panel has been created, also to focus on the vibrant traditions in Tamil and Malayalam. So there are two themes around which this panel is organized. Firstly, that the university learning that's happening in the academia is curricular learning is based in English. Most of the theories and thinkers we talk about are from different parts of the world, mostly Europe and North America. Not that we should not learn about them. We should do that, but there is a need to internalize relevant ideas and also learn a lot about what's happening at the grassroots level in various languages and various indigenous traditions, folk traditions that are, and there should be a creative blending of this, so concepts emerging from this part of the world. So lately, social sciences have not engaged as much literature of their times. In the early 20th century, social science people were all themselves literary figures, polymath, but today it is rare to find such engagements. So we are focusing on two themes in this panel. And one is the whole idea of literary imagination vis-a-vis social science imagination. In social science, we talk about truth, we talk about facts, ideological background, and how we have to negotiate and try and represent reality in a particular way. But literary imagination also negotiates these things. And there are rich variations in the Indian languages. There are very intricate work, whether it's a novel, poetry, or short story. They do try to have a happy in a mix of the political issues with a literary and linguistic ornamentation and intuition. So it's interesting to know how literature approaches human life. How is it, what is its relation to human life? And therefore try and see what synergies can be had between social science and literary imagination. Second theme in this panel is that increasingly we notice that in the subnational level, in the regional languages, there is a literary sphere that is emerging. And most significantly, this literary sphere is emerging from the activism of people, individuals, highly motivated individuals, and their voluntary efforts. Voluntary because many of them have their own professions, they have full-time professions, but they are pursuing this kind of literary activism as a matter of interest. And a large number of them are also located in small towns and not in metropolitan towns. So the very rich and strong network of enthusiastic readers have been created. And this is completely outside the pale of university institutions or the institutional forms of learning. I think that this development is extremely important for us. What is the kind of discussion that is happening there? Who are the people who are coming together? what motivated these literary activists to enter and use literary activism as a form of activity, and what are their goals, what is the meaning they derive, and what's the role of internet and other technologies in creating this literary and intellectual public. So I think these are emergent trends, and they are going to be very significant in the future for creative and original thinking. And we have a very eminent panelist. We also have a celebrated chairperson of this panel, Dr. E.V. Ramakrishnan himself, a poet and a comparative literature, and who's won the Kerala Sahitya Academy Award. We cannot think of a better person to chair this panel. And we have three eminent panelists, Dr. D. Ravikumar, Dr. Sunil Krishnan, and Dr. Khadija Mumtaz. All three of them have a full profession which is keeping them busy, but they are either contributing, they write, they're contributing to literature, or they are literary activists, or blogging or writing on public issues, speaking on public issues, creating an intellectual group or a network. So this is something of great interest, how they negotiate these different careers. Dr. Ravikumar, who is the first panelist himself, has made time to be here, though he has to go for an inauguration, which is attended by the Tamil Nadu Minister for Education. But he has made time, and amidst all that pressures on his time, he's here. So we would rather have move quickly to the panel. And we have 2.5 hours today. We have the time breakup as well. So I'm handing over the session to the chairperson, Professor Ramakrishnan, and he will take it from here. And thank you all for your time. I really look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. And we will straight away get into the program. I'm very happy to be part of this very eminent panel. Dr. D. Ravikumar, who is a poet, writer, and activist, is well known. He is a co-founder of Navayana, and I'm sure most of the university audience will be very familiar with the eminent work being done by Navayana. Dr. Ravikumar has translated Foucault, Sayed, etc. into Tamil, and also African and Latin American poets. So he has been instrumental in introducing a whole lot of ideas into Tamil literature. And he has actually been the editor of 2 or 3 journals, Nirappirikai, I hope I pronounce it rightly, and Manarkeni. These are 2 journals I can actually see in the introduction given to me. And as a committed human rights and anti-caste activist, your work actually has been very, very illustrious. And I welcome you to the panel. And since time is short, we will listen to you. And over to you, Dr. Ravikumar.
Good afternoon to everybody, Dr. Ramakrishnan and Dr. Sujata and others, the scholars who are here to listen and share the ideas. Sorry for the political engagements today, unexpected, because the Higher Education Minister fixed the date and time. This building constructed from my MP LAD's fund, so I have to be here in the function. This is my fate. I am a writer among politicians. I am a politician among writers. So a stranger in these 2 areas. I start with my own experience. In Tamil Nadu, the discussion about Dalit literature started in the 80s, taking from the influence from both Marathi and Kannada Dalit writings. And in those days, I was with Marxist-Leninist movement, and I was working in the rural areas. And we have discussed about the crisis in socialist construction and other things. And after the collapse of Soviet Union and East European countries, and we came out from the Marxist-Leninist movement, and we have started the journal Nirapirihi to discuss about the issues faced by Marxists all over the world. We have discussed the theories and also the experience of these socialist countries. And that time, Tamil Nadu faced many caste violence, and as a human rights activist, I also involved in fact-finding and other activities. And slowly, I immersed in the Dalit activism. And I have started the journal for Dalit literature in 1997. Before that, we have brought some special literary numbers through Nirapirihi, exclusively for Dalit literature. But later, I started the bi-monthly journal Dalit. Fortunately, Dr. E.V. Ramakrishnan also here. We have published his article in 1998 itself. And so we have translated and introduced many Dalit writers into Tamil. And also from the beginning, I have published many writings from African American writers and also Latin American and other writers. Because, I don't want to confine the Dalit literature to Dalits only, because I understand Dalit is not an identity, it is a subjectivity. So Althusser said, ideology interpolates an individual into a subject. So here in India, the Varnashrama Dharma or Sanatana ideology interpolates us into subjects. So a Dalit is a subjectivity consciously chosen by an individual to negate or reject the interpolation or the subjectivity. So Dalit is not an identity, it's a subjectivity. It's a conscious act, is my understanding. So I have published many writers from all over the world, not only writers from oppressed societies, also many women writers, including Helen Sisu, Lucy Rigare, and other feminist philosophers. And I want to expand the sphere of Dalit writing. So it made some impact among the Dalit, among the Tamil little magazines. So So little magazines, I think Sunil Krishnan is going to talk about little magazines and their impact in Tamil. So little magazine culture is an important one in shaping the ideas and also the understanding in Tamil literary circuit. So when I published the journal, I understand the need to extend our activities. So I took the example from African American activists, and have organized Dalit cultural festivals, and invited many artists, not only from the community and other anti-caste activists to perform. They have staged many plays and reciting songs uh, uh, and giving speeches, everything. And it's a whole day celebration. We have organized the Dalit Cultural Festival in many areas of Tamil Nadu. So it also created a lot of impact uh, other than literary circle. So and also I took the initiative from African American activists, and I was, started celebrating the Dalit History Month about 20 years ago. I started celebrating Dalit History Month in April, the birth month of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. So these activities slowly uh, 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 expanded, and not only by Dalit writers and activists, and also other uh, activists who are interested in anti-caste activism. And for the past 30 years, uh, the Dalit writings, because of all these activities, the Dalit writings uh, become one of the important stream of Tamil writing here. So now, more than one Mr. Pumani and Gimayam and Indiran, Dharman, all these Dalit writers, they have received Sagitya Academy Awards in the past decade. So it happened only because of the activities of Tamil Dalit writers and activists here. Because only after the emergence of Dalit literature and Dalit activism, everybody in Tamil Nadu, they are forced to respond to the questions we have raised in various platforms. Not only in literary platforms, cultural platforms, also in political platforms. So in the last 30 years, we have achieved significant victories in establishing the Dalit literature and Dalit culture and other things in Tamil Nadu. And these activities are not only uh, uh, literary activities. I think they are also activities to create a cultural capital. The idea of cultural capital defined by Pierre Bourdieu is well sorry. It is very much relevant to Tamil Dalit activism here. So I consciously building the cultural capital of Dalit by publishing journals and books and also other literary materials. So we are slowly creating Dalit publishing house. Now many Dalit publications has emerged on Mr. Ranjit Pa Ranjit, a very well-known cinema director. He also started a magazine for Dalit literature called Neelam, and he is producing many films and short films, and he is doing very important works in the cultural sphere. So now the Dalit writing, he has established a distinctive identity, distinctive place in the Tamil literary sphere. So now a problem emerged among Dalit writers. See, the writers who misunderstand the meaning of Dalit, they reject the Dalit identity. They started rejecting the Dalit identity because they think Dalit is an identity. It's a substitute. They think Dalit is a substitute for scheduled caste or some caste names. So they don't want to identify themselves as Dalit writer. They reject the identity. Take for an example, writer Emayam, who received the Sakitya Academy uh, uh, 2 years ago, and he openly rejected the Dalit identity because he don't want to be called as a Dalit writer. I am a Tamil writer. I am a writer. I don't want to be called as a Dalit writer. It is a case for Pumani also. He also don't want to be identified as a Dalit writer. This thing happened because the word Dalit become a substitute for scheduled caste. That's why now the National Commission for Scheduled Caste also issued an order for not to use the word Dalit in a government records because it creates a problem in the legal issues, because there is no the caste called Dalit in records. So don't use the word Dalit. I see you using the National Commission's order. Some advocates also belongs to scheduled caste, and they are indoctrined by the Sanatan ideology. They filed, they send legal notices to uh, publication and newspaper editors of newspapers uh, for using the word Dalit. So the very famous publication from Tamil Nadu, the Hindu, they have also received such notices, and they also responded some few years ago. So now these Sanatan ideology, Sanatanis who are agitated, who are uh, uh, disturbed by the emergence of Dalit literature, Dalit activism. They want to confuse the Dalit writers themselves, and they convince some writers, some activists to work against their interest itself. So it is happening. It is a recent development in the Dalit literary circuit. Recently, the Tamil Nadu government has given the library order for my journal Dalit. But they have insisted me to get the RNI registration to use the library order. But RNI is a facility to use the cheap, the postage. But the Tamil Nadu government, they are insisting to get the RNI. But if you apply the name Dalit, they don't give the RNI registration to the journal called Dalit. So these are the new kind of confusions uh, we are facing here. So I have decided not to use the library order. I continue my publication without any RNI. So now in Tamil Nadu, see, the Dalit writers are very, very active, and they only write more stories and novels, and the quality of the content of the Dalit writing also witnessed a great change. In early times, they were mostly realistic, mostly in realistic mode. They use the realism, and whether it is a short story or novel or poetry, they use the mostly the realistic mode, and also they use the folk literary elements in their writing. Now they slowly they have started experimenting with the forms and also the subjects. So now they are producing many literature, and they are writing novels, short stories, poems, different style and genre. And one recent novel written by Ms. Tenmori, it discuss about three Dalit women, and in a village setting. But it talks about the history, Dalit history, and also uh, 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 the rich tradition, cultural tradition of Dalit people there. See, now they are started rejecting the uh, traditional way of storytelling, and also the traditional way of using the subjects in their stories. So this is the next phase of Tamil Dalit writing. I think it is now emerging. So the Dalit activism and Dalit literary activities encourage the Dalit writers, and also they have contributed in many ways to the general Tamil literature by translation, by their own works, and by introducing many theories. Because only after the introduction of Dalit writing Tamil, the theories like post-structuralism and postmodernism and all these subaltern studies and everything become as a discussed point in Tamil literary circuit. Only because of their emergence, Tamil writers discussed and they studied many theories, philosophers from uh, Europe and also African American writer, and they discuss many feminist theories and also many post-colonial theories here. So Dalit writers only force the Tamil readers and also writers to think and discuss about all these new ideas. So they have directly and indirectly contributed to the development of Tamil literature here. So after 25 years, I have started the magazine 97. Now this is the 25th year of the magazine called Dalit. So I see great change and great understanding and also recognition for the Dalit literature, Dalit writers in Tamil Nadu. So I think it is only because of the Dalit literary activism. It happened only because of the sustained and uncompromised force of Tamil Dalit writers here. So we are here in a comfortable place now, and we are now, the Tamil Dalit writers are now started to enter in their second, the next phase of writing and experiments. So by these words, I conclude, and I will join again with you if time permits, and because the minister is coming. Sorry for concluding. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Devi Kumar, for a very informed discussion on the Dalit contribution to Tamil literature. We will have time to take up, but for a very small summary of what you said, you did mention that Dalit is not an identity, but something consciously constructed through the struggle, through a conscious, willful involvement in the activist struggles of the community. That's a very important point. And you also mentioned the organization of Dalit cultural festivals, which created a ambience of consciousness among the not only Dalits, but among the reading public. And these actually contribute towards making a cultural capital, as you very well said. And this has allowed a new generation of writers to actually emerge into the mainstream. And now they may not actually need the epithet Dalit. I can very well understand why Imayam or Pumani may not actually like to be called quote unquote Dalit writer, but the long struggle to reach a stage where they need not actually use that word, maybe that shows the achievement of the Dalit movement. And as you mentioned toward the end, the so-called Sanatani ideology definitely is still very much active, and it in a way tries to disrupt many of these activities of resistance which you have been mounting through multiple fora, multiple cultural means, media. And toward the end, you also mentioned that a new phase of Dalit writing in Tamil is very much available in the writings of writers like Tenmori. Thank you for a very important contribution towards this panel on truth, imagination, and ideology. Let's actually go to the second speaker. We have Dr. Sunil Krishnan here, who is an Ayurvedic physician by training and profession. And he is also a Neo-Gandhian who writes short stories and novels in Tamil. He has received the Yuva Puraskar Award for Literature given by Central Sahitya Academy. His literary life, actually there is much to, but I will not go into the details, but I will only say he has founded a literary circle, Marapachi Literary Circle, which organizes literary gatherings in Karaikudi every Sunday, starting from January. This has been going on since Jan 2019. And a whole list of writers have been actually part of this very successful weekly gatherings. He has written on Gandhi, Gandhism, and Gandhians, and he has also been very vocal about the complexities of modern life with modern metaphors. And the awards he has actually received, like an Ashok Novel Award, and Sahitya Akademi Yuva Puraskar, which I mentioned earlier, and Kana Subramanian, a very illustrious name in Tamil literature, Kana Short Story Award. All these actually suggest he has contributed very effectively to contemporary Tamil literature. Over to you, Sunil Krishnan. I invite Sunil Krishnan to make his presentation.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening, my dear friends. Good evening, respected panel and my dear co-panelists. To start with, maybe I would like to start with an Harold Bloom quote. Harold Bloom says that our map or general theory of the mind may be Freud's, but Freud, like all the rest of us, inherits the representation of mind at its most subtle and excellent from Shakespeare. So it is a very interesting quote from Harold Bloom. He argues that in order to explain the concepts and theories, Freud used Shakespeare and he needed Shakespeare. But the relationship is not the other way around. That is to apply available theories over the work of art. As a reader of literature, the latter exercise gives rarely any penetrating insight into the work of art, is my humble opinion. So, if we start by asking two simple and basic questions: why do we read stories? Why do people write stories? If the answer is amusement and amusement alone, an exercise to kill boredom, then maybe we have underestimated the power of stories. The culture is built through a series of stories which evolve into myths. Every taboo which our society has defined, they are myths actually. They are stories which have evolved into the myths. So stories, when they captivate the common imagination, they grow into it. Myths have traditionally played a role in defining us. So if it's defining us, and it is also defining the otherness, the others. So there is this power distribution which is happening because of the stories. So during the reforming era, maybe the 19th century later part and the 20th century earlier part, the pretty interesting things happened. We had cultural interactions happening, and the social structures which were built, which became rigid because of the stories, they were challenged by the modern writers who came up not with history, they came with stories. It's like, stories versus stories confronting stories. Every myth were either re-narrated, they were deconstructed. Take for example, Purmai Pittan has wrote a story about Agaligai. Agaligai, as we know, is a Ramayana story. He deconstructed it and re-narrated it to fix it to another platform regarding the feministic portrait. So these things, so when there is a power structure which is very rigid, which is very uncompromising, and to make it, to infuse some fluidity, the stories come into play. That's what has been happening, at least in Tamil literature. We can see some transitions. Bardiyar, the famous poet, he re-narrated Panjali Sabadam to infuse the national. He re-narrated Panjali Sabadam in tandem with the nationalistic fervor which was happening during his times. So Pulmi with Nasaito, he re-narrated the Agaligai story, Agaligai myth. So one interesting personality of the times which I wanted to share about him is Ayodhidasa Pandita. He's regarded as one of the foremost intellectual of his times. He is very much relevant, and he's being spoken of highly today. He's considered as a pioneer social reformer as well. Ayodhidasa Pandita, his immense contribution to us is that he has written a book, Indra Loga Charitram. Indra Loga Charitram, it's like, it's a Puranic, it's like a Purana, it's a new Purana. It is a new Purana which is written from a Dalit angle, which inverses the already existing Puranic narration. He has countered a Purana with another Purana, which is very interesting. Actually, he has not employed the history. He has not used the data, but he has used Purana to counter the Purana, because the Purana is what the myths is what that legitimizes the stigma, legitimizes the untouchability, legitimizes the idea. So here he has tried to inverse it by doing a reversal of it by re-narrating it into a Purana. So he is a very pioneer in this manner. So a good writer, actually, he does not conjure a world out of pure imagination. He cannot do that out of a pure imagination. I do think that he cannot write his whims and fantasies. Basically, a good literary writer, he is a critic. He's a critic. When things seemingly go well, he is a critic. When things doesn't go well, when there's no hope, he is a soothsayer. That's what he or she. It's not gender. I believe a good writer is like a channel or a medium who communicates with the spirits, because he's very sensitive to his environment, to his time, to the socio-cultural system in which he lives. He is very much shaped by these things. These things shape the lumen inside him, so that the timeless can manifest through the crevices created by these factors. The timeless flows through these, but it is the individual rootedness, how sensitive he is to the surrounding, that decides the output. So he becomes a channel. He is very much affected. In a way, that there is a unique way in which a writer brings the history into his fiction. So it's not the usual historical, it's not the usual approach, but he has a very, very unique approach on the social dimensions, how the social strata changes over time. For example, how he sees the bigger events, the war crimes or something like that. I would like to share an example, illustrate an example by quoting a story of A. Mutling. He's a very famous, he's a very senior most Tamil writer. He's an Edam-based Tamil writer who lives in Canada. He has written a story which is Friday Nights, Vellikkilamai Iravu. In that story, it's about, it begins with a story of a parent, a single parent, a woman who has a 5-year-old girl with her. They live in Canada as a refugee. It begins with telling about the difficulties of the girl in studying, in reading there, in acclimatizing to that particular region, getting accommodated there. She faces some psychological pressure. She keeps on losing her things. She doesn't have any focus. Like that, the story begins. So then the story, as it goes on, next we are told about they consult a child psychiatrist. He says that she is having some intense childhood trauma. Maybe you should try to address that. So that's the reason. So again, as they talk, her particular obsession is that she wants to know who is her father. Muthulingam writes about the culture in Canada, how there is a hierarchy between kids who have both the parents, kids who have single parents, and kids who don't have parents or who live with the as a stepsons or stepdaughters, like that. So there is a hierarchy, and she is being ridiculed for that as she comes from a single parent. Her mother says that your father is there in the Sri Lanka, like that. She keeps on saying. But this has been a very traumatic experience, and she keeps on asking to take her to the father. So through her connections, her mother decides to take her to the town, to the native land, Sri Lanka. She talks to a journalist there, and she makes some arrangements. And one day they fly to Sri Lanka, and they go to a place where Sinhala locality. They go to a place and they enter a particular home. And when they enter that home, the mother asks, is there the particular person? He mentions the name. Is he living here? The lady of the house, she becomes very confused. She says that he has gone out for market. He will come, please sit down. And there is a girl there. There's a girl very, very similar to this 5-year little girl of the daughter of her. They have some similarities in the future. And he comes into the house. He sees them, but he couldn't get anything anyway. She just says that it was some 6 years before when you and your friend as Sinhala soldiers broke into our home and you raped us. She just reminds that incident in front of the family, and then she just leaves from the house. When they go back in the auto, she tells to the kid, so see, you should not pester me again. I have shown you who is your father. That's the end of the story. So, see, we have data on war crimes. we have immense data on war crimes, how it's happening, like that, how so many stories. But when it is narrated through a story, it communicates with you, it affects you, it creates a very it gives various unique dimensions. So you could empathize with it. So the purpose of story is actually to break the stereotype. That's what I always believe. So it has to break the stereotype. It has to humanize everything. So in that way, in a way, I feel that stories, fiction, and theories, they complement each other in understanding the social process. So they are not, they are not islands of something. They're not distinct. So this is one thing. And the other aspect is that, as Ravi Kumar sir has pointed about this Tamil little magazine culture, I just wanted to share something about on that aspect also. The modern literary scenario in Tamil, to my knowledge, it remained an outcast from academia at least till 2000s. I think Sir's Niraprihai made a very significant contribution, in fact, in creating a jolt in the Tamil literary module, Tamil literary history. And from then on, I think that impact has shown that after post 2000s, we do have some change between some interactions happening between the academia and the literary persons. But still, largely, they remain indifferent, is what I feel. As a writer, I identify myself with the Little Max tradition. I always have felt that the Little Magazine tradition is very underrepresented in academic circles. So it is in a way an idealistic endeavor. It's about a single person's dream. So be it Manipuri during the pre-independent era, or the Sisu Chellapas Eduthu, or the later Kasada Dabara, and then we have Vichi and Niraprikai. So all these things, all these little magazines, they didn't have any financial backups. The readership circle was not very wide. They had very limited readership circle. So what propelled them? The idea of literature. The idea of literature is it's like a virus which has occupied your mind, which the only intention of is being to proliferate, like that. So this is a very idealistic endeavor. Now we have 2 or 3 important living little magazines like Kalkudurai or Manalu, or there are few little magazines, and there are a host of e-magazines which have come in Tamil in recent years. So these e-magazines, again, these were run not by writers or literary critics or someone. They work in software industries. They work in various industries. They shell money. They spend their time. At least there are 10 to 12 e-zines which are operating in Tamil right now. So what propels them to be active is that that's the idea of literature they have got. It is a kind of literary activism. So now when we see the post 2000 era in Tamil, this is one of the most vibrant period of Tamil literature. The readership has grown vast into multifold now. It has increased vastly. So there are plenty of new writers, plenty of new contributors coming into frame, plenty of writers with varieties. They have so these e-zines, they give platform for them because relatively the biggest advantage of e-zines is that you don't have page restriction. So there's a chance for farm experimentation. So these things have helped. So, in fact, this literary activism, like Sundar Ramasamy, his college, he has organized a meeting like what we do. Sir talked about Marapachi Literary Circle. It's a small circle. We have around 20 to 25 readers. It's a small place. The place where I live, it's a Karakuri, is very small place. So how we created this circle, I want to tell some details about it. We used to have book fairs every year in Karak. What happens is that it's a relatively small place and the market for books is not that much. So the big and respectable modern literary publications, they won't come to this place because it will be financially a loss for them. So what I did through my friends, I used to contact these publishers. And I'm a practicing Ayurvedic doctor. But what I did, I took a stall here, and from leading publishers like Tamilni, Vamsi, Yavarum, Kalachodu, Sandhya, and whomever I have good relationship and whoever they can trust me with books in credit. So I took them. I brought these books, and without anyone's help, I just moved all the parcels and I'll arrange the stall. And in 10 days, except for my clinical time, other times I will sit there and I'll sell the books. After that, we'll unpack and redistribute the books to the original sources and settle it financially. So this was happening for 3 years. So when people come, when I see them, and when they enter, so by when they see relatively the modern literature, the people who come into the modern literature stall, they will be very less. So it is not financially viable for me as well. It will be a loss. In 10 days, at the maximum, some 40,000 rupees would have been what I have gained. So which is a loss actually. But what we did, I tried to find some like-minded persons who come into this come into the bookshop. So who are the like-minded, who have some interest or some familiarity with the modern literature. So we gathered as a group. That's how we started this Marapachi Literary Circle. So after 3 years, because when we say that there is the readership is not good, the readership is not poor, but what efforts we have made. So we thought that we will introduce the stories, we will discuss the stories, we will discuss the nuances, we will discuss the poetry. There is another movement, organization, Vasaga Sale, which had a very pan Tamil Nadu presence. In each town, they had a kind of club kind of thing where people come and discuss the stories. So this was also happening, and we have eminent storytellers like Bhava Chalakray, and there are some other regional storytellers who narrate stories over the weekend. This was also happening, and with the YouTube, especially the post-corona era, we have plenty of book reviewers and story narrators on the YouTube. So digital platform is very well used in that. And so that's how we started this Marapachi Literary Circle. So first we started to discuss among ourselves. We take some stories of some writers. In each day we will discuss 3 short stories. Like that it happened. And then we discussed about what our books we read that over the week. And then suddenly one writer happened to come here accidentally. So we invited him and we had a discussion with him. We immediately felt that the quality of discussion was very high. So we made it a regular thing. We invited writers. We used to take care of his charges. We all used to bear it. We all used to share the expenses. And he will stay with us for 1 or 2 days. We will have a meeting. So this has been happening for quite some time. So what has happened is that there are some promising writers coming from our area, Karaikudi. So there were some young poets and writers who have started writing inspired by these meetings. So this is what I just wanted to focus. So maybe we cannot explain what is the motive or what is the thing, what is the reason behind this literary activism, but somehow it is very fulfilling. It is in spite of the numbers doesn't matter. It gives us great hope, and it keeps us in good energy and spirits. I sincerely thank the panel for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil Krishnan, for very elaborate reflection on the very purpose of the story. You brought out the, maybe as a practicing short story writer, this is something very close to you, how by telling stories, we actually come to know the other. You see, one of the functions of storytelling is to explore the other and its domain. And you also mentioned how by telling stories, we have rewritten the earlier kind of narratives. You mentioned Pudumai Pittan's very famous story, which actually retells the story of the Ramayana, and Bharatiyar's very well-known Panchali Shapadam, which in the context of nationalism, rewrote the whole story of Draupadi. And you mentioned Ayodhya Das, a very, very well-known intellectual from the early part of 20th century, a pioneer of social activism. His Indraloka Charitram, as you mentioned, it's a new Puranam which inverts or counters the Puranas which legitimate the stigma of the downtrodden. So books of this kind use the medium of the short story or maybe the story as a whole to create an ideological kind of intervention in the social imagination of the community. That's one of the prime things we are actually taking up for discussion. And your illustration of this point with a wonderful short story, I didn't catch the Tamil name, Friday Nights. When we read a story of this kind, the idea of the war crime is no more an abstract, what you call a news item. You see, we enter into the very complex world of the victimization, the trauma of what war crimes really leave, and which survives into many lives much later. And your point that theories and stories, they complement each other. That also is an important point which I would like to take up for discussion. You see, we need stories, and we also need ways of looking at these stories through theoretical frames. And you mentioned how little magazines have played a very constructive role in creating a literary public sphere, and how the idea of literature itself has been challenged by these little magazines. And you mentioned the e-magazines, which are making waves in Tamil literature. That's actually a very interesting thing we should actually pay attention to. And there are discussion groups you mentioned of different kind, which a network of such discussion groups contribute towards a certain awareness raising kind of project. So very informative, very well thought out, good presentation. Thank you, Dr. Sunil Krishnan. We would now look at, I am introducing Dr. Khadija Mumtaz, a close friend, a well-known Malayalam writer. We were together only last week for a function. So Dr. Khadija Mumtaz is a practicing gynecologist. She was a professor in the medical college at Calicut, Kozhikode. And she even today, even now she practices her medical role, may not be full-time. And she's a very well-known novelist in Malayalam. Barsa, the novel which got Kerala Sahitya Academy Award, is one of the classics we are all proud of. It has been translated into English, Tamil, and Kannada. And she also has other novels like Adhuram, Atmatirthangalil Mungini Verunu, Niti Elutugal. Niti Elutugal also has received awards. And she has published short stories as well, 2 short story collections and 7 collections of critical and personal articles or essays. Purushanariyata Stri Mukhangal, the women whom man does not know. Sargam Samoham, Khayalat, Avanavanodu Thaneyulla Samsarangal. All these are wonderful essays, collections. And she has also written science fiction, Matragam and Pirakam Mumbai Karudalode. She was the vice chairperson of Kerala Sahitya Academy between 2016 and 2021. She is part of the academic council of Tunja Tharutachan Malayalam University and a member of school curriculum committee. And she actually plays a very important role in many social movements in Kerala. So welcome, Dr. Khadija Mumtaz, and over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Professor. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm audible. Huh?
Yes, yes, can hear you. Yeah.
Very happy to appear before you, the august audience of, I think so, the students, teachers, and other dignitaries are also there in this creative colloquium. It was a pleasant surprise for me that Professor E.V. Ramakrishnan is chairing the session, because as he told, I think 10 days before, we were together in an award function in which Professor was receiving awards for his book on novel criticism. Actually, it is not criticism, I feel. It is a study of not only Malayalam, but other Indian language novels. And he is searching for how time and place is represented in these novels. It's it was a very good experience to read and talk about that in that session. Professor V. Sujata, I am interested because she is interested in our field, medical field. Many of our essays and researches are about the medical field, the ethical, political, and humanitarian issues concerning this field. We have associate coordinator Tushala, I don't know whether she came, Aparna Dikshit also, and the 2 co-speakers, I understood from their talks that both of them are really activists, literary activists, which I am not. My activism probably maybe through my writings only. I don't think that I am a real activist or anything, because I cannot mention anything like that, except what Professor E.V. Ramakrishnan has talked. Of course, I write novels. 4 novels I have written, less than 20 short stories. Actually, I like to write novels and read novels also, and many articles, of course. And I conduct or I talk, I make many speeches and also discussions. Following that, I can do discussions also. To mention, I am in the curriculum committee and also advisory committee to aid formation of new organ transplantation rules, because it is related to our field also. I came to the field of writing very late, that is after 40 years only, because of my this job also. Only short collections of works I have. And out of the 6 to 7 collections of articles, one of them is named Dr. Deivamalla. Doctor is not God. That was actually experiences in my treatment career. And as he mentioned, 2 science fiction books also. I was brought up as a Muslim girl with, as you can imagine, with some restrictions. But from childhood onwards, I was attracted to reading, mainly novels, the works of the legends in Malayalam, Vaikom Muhammad Bashir, M.T. Vasudevan Nayar, Thagazhi Shivashankarapilla. So, and I know that that is in the novel arena, I am nothing in number or in quality, I am sure. And for the last 6 years, as he mentioned, I was the vice chairperson of Sahitya Akademi. I have to travel and I have to make talks and all. So actually, I didn't write much, probably 2-3 short stories and some articles. But many speeches, of course, many speeches. Probably, I think it is not because of that. I was a little disturbed because of the political atmosphere, the injustice towards those who dissent democratically, as we all know, attacks on minorities and Dalits. Of course, there was COVID-19 for us. And for Kerala, specifically, there were in 2 years successively, there was a flood also. So a little worried about these alarming changes in environment also. So I couldn't write or I couldn't make any creative works during this period, except for 1 or 2-3 short stories, I think. But I make speeches, both online and also direct. And I tried to make them attractive or acceptable or thought-provoking by relating them to literature. Usually when I talk, somehow I relate it to literature, not only mine, the great writers also. For example, this month, 15th, I am going to have a speech in the speech series in Malayalam University. The subject I selected is Vibhajanam, Pauratvam, Sahityam. That is partition, citizenship, literature. So I hope I will deliver the speech relating with some of the works in Malayalam and also in other Indian languages. I selected Anand, a Malayalam novel, famous novelist, Anand and O.V. Vijayan. They are for long at Delhi, in Delhi. So they know this subject very thoroughly, and it comes in their novels, Abhayarthigal and Guru Sagaram. So about the refugees, about the growing new nationalism also. So I can talk these, connecting with this, these works. And also about Pauratvam, that is citizenship. I will be analyzing that subject with works, relating it to the works of Taslima Nasreen, because we know the partition of Pakistan again, and the citizenship problem is mainly in that area. Usually the writers will have ideological inclinations. That is natural. And I think usually writers will have a little more social obligation that comes from the inner self, which craves for justice, love, equality. along with a quest for unlimited freedom. That's the basis of their writing, I feel. But I believe that it should not be dealt with as plain facts or proclamation of ideologies, as you mentioned in that. It should be blended in the body of the work. I don't know how much I succeeded in that, but it should be blended in the body of the work. Imagination and language make the truth more striking. I think Dr. Sunil Krishnan also mentioned like that. The story, the life and feelings of characters will help the readers to travel along with the social change or social facts. Professor E.V. Ramakrishnan, in his, that book which I mentioned, he has mentioned or he has documented that novel is the complete form of literature. Because it is better documentation of history, place and regional language. And novels reflect our cultural plurality very well. Novelist also will have his own ideologies and inclinations, but unlike history books, novels will have the other. It's very interesting when I read this. He said, a novel will have the other reading in itself. I fully agree with him. I used to talk this in a different way. That is the same actually. That is in a brihat novel, a big novel, which so much that is diversity of characters and a long period of time also, we will get the picture of different types of people, how they tasted that particular period of time. And going through that, readers will get their own path or their own realization about the that period or that time or that social ideology, how it affected different types of people differently. So that is the importance of novel compared to a history book. History book, it will be written according to the wish of the or according to the inclination of the historian only. But here we get the other readings in the same book. I used to mention usually the great novelist, Malayalam novelist Thagazhi, his Kayar. There is a novel called Kayar, that is choir. The meaning is choir. Many lives, events are intertwined in that. So that's why this name was given, Kayar. The period is about 200 to 300 years, that period. And that itself includes the scope for many novels. The place is South Kerala, specifically Alappuzha district, Kuttanad. It's a lowland. People are usually engaged in, most of the people are engaged in agriculture. In the beginning of the novel, that area was ruled by Travancore Maharaja. Of course, there was colonial power above that. Maharaja's power is restricted. And we find feudal lords, landlords. We find Dalits who work in the fields. And we find the changing political scenario through this novel. While we read, we find the initial period, the renunciation, Dalit renunciation, then the Savarna renunciation, because Dalits get education in Kerala. That is, I think it is earlier than other states. So the Dalit renunciation, and they have started to retort. Then the political scenario, we find the Congress, International Congress getting rooted in that area. Then comes the communist ideology. And by 1970, that is the period where the novel ends, we find the youth are attracted to Naxalism. Naxal ideology. And we find a Brahmin boy who is involved or helping the Naxal people. And this Brahmin father couldn't understand how he is attracted to such an ideology, because he is believing in this, he cannot understand that is socialism or all people are equal, like that. He cannot grasp that idea. And we find Dalits getting attracted by the socialist communist ideals, and they start to retort. I hope you heard about YLR appraisal. YLR appraisal is the Dalits retorting against the governing people. That is, there was a Diwan, he's a Tamilian, Sir C.P. Ramaswamy. So this he was a very cruel Diwan, it's mentioned. So this Dalit people started to retort violently also. That is the YLR appraisal. That also comes in that. Landlords and upper caste people have their own justification to resist these changes, and they mourn over the tragic decline of feudal system and caste system, which they feel that it is essential for the stability of the society. So we can hear their narration or their minds also. We can read that also. Tagari actually was coming from a feudal background. So sometimes we feel that he is thinking in some areas with the feudal mind. But of course, we have the other in the same novel. That is the difference. Now I will try to explain. I don't know, my talk will be a little different from others because they are having so many things to mention about their activism. Actually, I'm not even not familiar with this social media also. I limit my this social media activity to some WhatsApp groups only, because I feel
is there a problem?
Yeah, can you hear me? I cannot see anybody. You can hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I will continue. I will use my mobile. I don't know, some problem with my it's difficult.
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, sir.
I would request all others to mute themselves. Maybe there is some noise interrupting.
I think you have logged in with other instrument also.
No, I am trying to log in with my mobile.
Okay.
You cannot see me. You can hear me.
Yeah.
You can hear me now. Okay.
We can see you, ma'am.
Okay. So I will go through 3 of my novels, through which I will.
We can't hear you, ma'am.
She
has lost the connections.
I think she will have to re-enter. She will have to re-enter.
Trying to enter through mobile.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Can this new account be made co-host so that they can speak?
Now can speak.
Thanks, Pankaj.
Unmute yourself.
has she entered?
She has, but she has
Ma'am, please unmute.
Dr. Mumtaz, you're muted.
Muted, yeah.
Okay, now Now
Yes,
you
we can hear you.
Okay. So I will go through quickly through my 3 novels, how I tried to combine the idea of combining truth and imagination. Okay. My first novel was only an entry point. Second novel, Barsa, is the one which won some recognition. Barsa, the word meaning means a lady who is not covering her face. Okay. It is through the life of a Hindu girl converted to Islam religion. I am doing a critical evaluation of the religion. That is, Sabida is a medical doctor. She marries a Muslim boy, Rashid. He's also a doctor. Later, both of them become doctor. So she's converting to Islam for the sake of love. Okay, and Islam, you can see the 2 phases. Islam in Sabida's premarital Malabar experience. Premarital and immediately after their marriage for 2-3 years. That is, we can see how a religion which was mingling with the local culture in her North Malabar village, festivals celebrated together, common myths, beliefs, songs, and all. It is, I think, Professor Ramakrishnan has mentioned about a novel, Hindi novel, Adha Gav, in UP, where the Muharram festival is celebrated by both Muslims and Hindus, even Muslims, the Sunni and the Shia. Actually, it is a celebration of Shia people. And here in this novel, this couple travels to Saudi Arabia, and they are working in Makkah, that is the holy city, where Sabida finds a very rigid Islam, not like the Islam in the North Malabar. And she is worried how the women are treated as secondary being or like slaves, the earthly concepts of sin and punishment, that is hell and heaven, the mystical elements of the religion is completely lost. This all disturbs Sabida, and she is a very inquisitive lady, inquisitive nature, and she asks questions. She reads a lot about the life of Prophet, his love affairs, his relationship with his wives, how he treated women believers. Actually, he was very kind towards the women believers. And we find the wives of Prophet Muhammad also is analyzing Islam and analyzing Prophet. There was one chapter in which Ummu Salma, the wife of Prophet had about 9 wives, and she is critically analyzing this, analyzing her own life and Prophet Muhammad also. And the opening chapter is a conversation of Sabida with Hagar. Hagar is Hajara, the wife of Prophet Ibrahim. That is Abraham, the forefather of Christians also. That is, when Muslims reach Saudi Arabia, they have to Makkah, they have to circumambulate the holy Kaaba, and then they are running between 2 mountains, Safa and Marwa. That's a symbolic running, symbolizing the running of Hagar in search of water for her child. Both of them were deserted there by her own husband, and the child was very small. So they are analyzing the rituals, both of them. Sabida actually goes into a trance, and she feels that she meets Hagar, and they are discussing, talking. They evaluate the rituals, and actually they go to the occasion of Abraham, that is Ibrahim, Prophet Ibrahim, decided to sacrifice his own son because he dreamt that God has asked him to sacrifice his own son. So here these two women are talking, and they are reaching at a point where they are thinking, if Hagar was asked to sacrifice the child, Hajra was asked to sacrifice the child by God, what will be her response? And it is mentioned that Hagar will argue with God. I cannot do that. You can understand me. You give me a lower place in heaven, or you don't give me a heaven, but I will not sacrifice my son. And this is the difference between a faith of a man and a woman. Woman has a friendly relationship with God. She can talk, and she will not do injustice, or she will not neglect her motherhood for the sake of getting the heaven. But men are not like that. They have a blind faith. That is what I wanted to tell by this experience. Another character is a Sufi character or a mystic, whom Rashid means. Rashid also has many questions about Islam, and he reaches here. Rashid meets a Sufi character, and he is a mysterious character, and he is telling that I have traveled through centuries. I'm coming from 5th, 6th century, and came with the will of God to talk to you. And through the interactions between these two, we get the history of Islam opening up. Actually, the political history of Islam. And I have tried to give a picture of holy city of Makkah, the natives, the foreigners, refugees, the colloquial Arabic language, Sunni-Shia conflict, which is still going on. And along with that, the eventful life of Rashid and Sabita is going. Malabar, that is Kerala, North Kerala. Malabar comes as nostalgic memories, the serene, charming, natural beauty, the memories of intercultural relationship, the songs, that is Vadakan part, which is common, that is without that is irrespective of religion, people know this Vadakan part, myths which unite different faiths. So at the end of the novel, Rashid and Sabida understands that it is the regional culture which unites them and the love between them, nothing else, not the religion as such, because the religion which is rooted in the regional culture is the one which is connecting them, and they are returning back to India. Next, I think 30 minutes for me. 30 minutes, no? Hello?
Yes, Dr.
Okay.
Khadija, yes.
Okay.
You can take, we have time.
Okay.
You can go for
Okay.
another.
The other persons didn't take much time also. Okay. The next novel I want to talk about is Athuram. Athuram. My own works. Athuram. The word meaning is something concerned with sickness. Sickness of body, not only body, but human mind. I wanted to talk. And some say that it is a campus story. Background is definitely the medical college where I studied and later became a teacher. And we find two generations of students. We find campus politics of 70s and 80s, 1970, 1980. There was Naxal influence, and many of the medical students were arrested and tortured, and their life was life was destroyed also. So that comes in the 70s, 80s. By passage of time, it becomes a partisan politics. By 90s, it is a violent partisan politics. And by 2000, we find it slips into a communal politics, like that, the politics in India also. So there is, you can find the lives of youth, their love affairs, their political conflicts, student-teacher relationship, youth festivals, and also patients. It's a hospital also, medical college. Patients and their worries, doctor-patient relationship, and medical ethics also I tried to include in some area. And you find two love affairs, both of them were broken. First was in the first generation, I mentioned, that is 70s, 80s, between a Muslim girl and a Christian boy. And it was...
She's lost the connection again.
Okay.
We lost you for a second, but you can see and hear you now.
Only a second, you lost?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I talked about two love affairs in two generations. First was in the 70s, 80s generation, that is medical students itself. It was the love between a Muslim girl and a Christian boy, and it was broken because of the orthodoxy and probably class difference between these two, because this girl was coming from a highly feudal family. The second generation affair between a Muslim and Hindu, it fails due to this Muslim girl was the daughter of the first Muslim lady. So this was broken because of the new politicized religious sectarianism. So the difference between the two periods. And the third novel was Nirti Eluthugal. You can, I can give the translation as writing in continuation, or something like extended writing. Actually, it is the life of three women in continuation, the daughter and the granddaughter. So this I named Nirti Eluthugal because a lady's life, a woman's life is not complete by her own, because she will be having ambitions, she will be having hopes, but they are not fulfilled. Probably she will try in the next generation, and that woman may be in the next generation. So it is an extension, their life. And along with this, Indian politics is also dealt with. The protagonist is a Muslim girl named Aisha, or Aishu she was called, a very intelligent girl born before independence. Her uncle was a social reformer. Initially, she was in Indian National Congress, but was a great fan of Gandhiji, and later changes his attitude and become a Muslim League leader. Why? That embarrasses Aishu also, this girl, and she has questions which are partially answered or unanswered, like that. So through the life of Aishu and through this novel, we get the other side of history, the usual history, the other side of common belief of Muslims and Muslim League are the only culprits of partition. So usually the Muslim and Muslim League are portrayed in novels and stories, even in Malayalam, as ignorant, unyielding, problem-creating people. So we get the other side of Muslim League also in this novel. Aishu's life, as I mentioned, she had shattered hopes. Her ambition to become a doctor is shattered, and she had to face the hard side of life. She became a housewife only. She wanted to become a doctor, but she becomes a housewife and the mother of many children, and the husband dies, and she has to fight for her children also, for herself and for her children. So this is what I want to tell, that is the women have to look forward through generations to fulfill their hopes. Aishu had a friendship. We don't know whether it was a love affair or not, very clear, when she was a pre-university student, she had a love affair or a friendship with a Dalit boy. And there was much scandal. And that was the reason, the main reason that she had to quit the college studies, even though she has to go to Chennai, that is Madras. That time there was no medical college in Kerala. It was pre-independence era. So she couldn't go to continue her studies. And decades after, the granddaughter, the third generation girl, meets that man. Aishu is already dead by that time, recently died. And this granddaughter meets that man who managed to become a doctor, that Dalit man who managed to become a doctor. He had suffered much marginalization also, but he tried and became a doctor and author of 2-3 books also. And this granddaughter meets him and they talk long. And while she is returning, she gets 2-3 books. And when she sees the books, she finds that in between the big books, there is a very small book, which was named, it is a poetry book. It was named Aisha. So that is about, and I tried to bring some aspects of Dalit marginalization and the influence of caste in Indian minds through this novel also. I'm not boasting that my writings are great or anything, but it made some movements, I know. It made some movements. It may be something like a fluttering of a leaf or anything. But I had much criticism, as you can imagine. I had to face criticism, but unexpected warm welcome also for Barsa, especially for Barsa, the novel Barsa. To tell my happiness, then word Barsa was attracted by many women, and they used to write to me also. And one girl, she was an activist actually, is a Muslim girl. She changed her name to Barsa. She changed her name to Barsa. And
we can hear you.
Okay.
You are muted.
So two couple. Two couples, I didn't know them before.
Something wrong?
Your
video is off.
Okay, I will enter.
Okay.
Should we?
No, we'll wait. She is here.
Okay. Sorry, so much.
No. These are...
So two couples, they are unknown to me. They called me and they told that they are putting their firstborn child's name as Barsa. So they were waiting until they are sure that their child is girl child. So this is something which was rewarding about my writing. And two short stories, just I will mention. One was Nam Jeevidangal Chuttadukkunnavar. Means we, the bakers of lives. Bakers, we bake the lives of our own children mainly. It deals with the neglected sexual needs of an autism boy. We know that autistic child's life is pictured in films and books also, in stories also. But I think this aspect, the sexual needs, which is neglected, that is, I feel, at least in Malayalam, my story came long before Subhash Chandran's Samudrashila. Subhash Chandran is a famous Malayalam writer. In Samudrashila, this theme is coming. And I know there is a Tamil film called Perambu that also deals with this same subject. The second one was Balyathil Ninnu Irangi Vanna Oral, because these are all socially important subjects. That's why I'm mentioning. ബാല്യത്തിൽ നിന്ന് ഇറങ്ങി വന്ന ഒരാൾ, the man who stepped down from childhood. It was the subject was child abuse, child abuse, which causes deep trauma in the girl's life throughout. And he was abused by a neighbor, and long after, that is decades after, this man comes to her house from the village. She's in the city. This man comes. At that time, she was a housewife. She's a working woman, and she's having an adolescent child also. So, but she couldn't, her husband welcomes this man very warmly, that is with much warmth. But she cannot forget that old trauma. And her husband is embarrassed by the way she is behaving to this man, because he doesn't know. And even this man couldn't recollect the probably, or he is pretending like that. And she was in a hurry to send him back. And this man, sadly, he's after some time, that is, he was there at home, and then he returns back. Then she feels, I could have pardoned him, and I could have behaved in a better way. I think that's the mind of a lady. I will conclude. I had written more articles, and as I told before, I tried to make it more attractive or artistic by linking it with this literature. I had discussions, talks in libraries, school, college, teachers association. It may be a book discussion, occasion of a commemoration of a great writer or a social leader. Always I insist to combine with the history, social changes, if possible through literature. And 50 of my speeches during the time of my vice chairman post was compiled to a book, and its name is Avanavanodu Thanneyulla Samsarangal, means talking to oneself, meaning whatever I speak, it should be sanctioned by my own self, or it should come from my heart only. And it refers to Khalil Gibran's famous wordings. Most of the time we are speaking to ourselves. It is a mere happening that when we speak loud, others listen. Thank you. I don't know how much I succeeded in conveying, and how I tried to combine facts and imagination, and that is a form of activism, I feel. Thank you, everybody, and a happy Onam. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Khadija Mumtaz. You spoke as a writer, and whatever you spoke came right from the heart, and it made, I am sure, a good impact. And as a Muslim girl who actually was brought up maybe in a traditional setup, you came to reading first, and later on, at a later stage, you began writing novels. And you actually also spoke about the last few years when you were very deeply affected by the calamities, natural calamities in Kerala, and issues like the attacks on the minority and Dalits. All these actually give us glimpses into your own way of relating to the world. You gave a graphic description of how Tagari's novel Kaya actually represents a long, period of Kerala history. And in a way, Kaya, which is actually a rope which is made of the fiber, coconut fiber, that itself may indicate the form of the novel here is a winding through the, as she said, the popular struggles, resistance movements, many political upheavals. So it's a veritable narrative of Kerala history of the last almost 150 years. And this also gives us her keen observation of what she actually looks for in a novel. She mentioned that history is something that fascinates her. She gave a very good account of how the novel Barsa, actually its plot she explained very well, and its major thematic preoccupations. I will not repeat them. And similarly, Aduram. Both these novels have made a very good impression on Malayali readers. I know they are very popular. Popular in the right sense, because they are very serious novels which are very artistically constructed. So particularly Barsa has received very wide critical attention, and it's part of many, I'm sure, syllabi and other courses. And she also mentioned how in Aduram she tries to trace the shift in the nature of the idea of politics. The very idea of politics has been changing in Kerala society. These are very important insights you have given while discussing your own works. And when you discuss Niti Eluttugal, the third novel, you also mentioned how the Dalit issue figures in the novel through the life of Aishu. So, Dr. Khadija Mumtaz, you have given us a wonderful account of not only your concern as a writer and your own engagement with history, but also your ideological position as a woman writing in today's Indian society. So thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. And now I will actually invite the discussant. We have Aparna here, Aparna Dikshit, Sujata, we have Aparna here.
Aparna Dikshit, I see her name. Are you here, Aparna?
Can you hear me, Aparna? Please unmute yourself and come.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. You are invited to speak.
Unable to unmute.
Okay, unable to unmute. Okay.
Should we?
Okay.
Okay. I have how do we? She's unable to.
1 second. We are enabling that. Pankaj.
I think she's unmuted now.
Fine.
Thank you so much. So I think I'm visible and I'm audible. Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So hello everyone. First of all, let me congratulate all the speakers for their wonderful lecture. And there's no need to mention that Professor Krishnan has already summed up all the session very well. So there is no need of repetition of the about the sessions. So let me try to initiate a discussion around the panel. So this panel was divided in two themes, that is the process of literary imagination and creativity, and the second one is literary activism. As Professor Krishnan has highlighted at the beginning, that when social science schools are debating their methodology of studying social realities, it is critical to understand how the literary imagination negotiates truth, facts, and ideological inclination while maintaining spontaneous flow and aesthetics. So I think under this broad idea, we had three wonderful lectures that discussed this debate at micro level. So Dr. Ravi Kumar's articulation is more about an epistemological position of a literary person. In social sciences, the interdisciplinary schools of knowledge are arguing the same. Like, who is speaking on behalf of whom? Across the discipline, the truth has been questioned. The standpoint epistemology is questioning the power relations
in case of knowledge production. So the same is applicable in case of literary imagination and creativity. And it ultimately reflects in literary activism. So let's take an example of a Dalit Hindi poet, a famous Hindi poet, Om Prakash Valmiki, from one of his poems. So it's मेरी माँ ने जने सब अछूत ही अछूत, तुम्हारी माँ ने सब बामन ही बामन, कितने ताज्जुब की बात है जबकि प्रजनन क्रिया एक जैसी ही है. So my mother gave birth to untouchables. Your mother is mother of higher caste people. However, they both went through the same process of reproduction. So here he is referring, like the poet is referring himself. He is placing his social reality through his literary craft. And it is same in the case of feminist writing and Adivasi writings. Like the other day, when Professor Savita Singh was talking about Jacinta Kereketa, who is an Adivasi poet, young poet. So Jacinta says somewhere in her poetic expression that she wants to become a tree. So and this is very close to her own understanding about self and the relationship of that she has with the nature, being an Adivasi. So as Dr. Ravi Kumar also said that the Dalit Tamil poets are experimenting with literary texts and placing their own reality strongly at the center stage. So the next panelist, Dr. Sunil Krishnan, referred to Bloom and strongly argued in favor of the strength of work of art over social forces. So his lecture again opened up a discussion that how much one can rely on the theories to narrate her truth without compromising the sense of poetry or literary understanding, or how radical or informatory one can be while experimenting with literature, or is there any other way around? So as he said, theory and story complementing each other. So this argument can be discussed at length, what I believe. A last speaker of the panel, Dr. Khatija Mumtaz, brought this idea to center stream that imagination and language make the truth more striking. She believes articles can also be made into a creative one by just touching it with your imagination. So it again opens up a new discussion, a new area of discussion, that can only imagination and literary language change dry facts in literature, or there are some other ontological issues that need to be looked at, or is there any possibility to dilute this binary of theory versus literature? So there can be again a topic of discussion that I believe that how internet or social media platform affected this debate of truth, imagination and literary criticism. And does internet prove itself as a tool of free expression for those who are not able to place themselves as a published writer, quote unquote, especially in case of Dalit and feminist writers? Or there can be another notion of discussion around the free flow of quickly written content in the name of creativity and imagination. So there are two aspects. So these highlights, I would like to hand over the session to the associate coordinator for Q&A. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Tushar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aparna, for very important inputs regarding all the three speakers. We will have a question answer session. Sujata, is there any other you want to add something, or do you, before we go into question answer sessions?
I'm good. We can go into the question answer session and listen to your comments.
Yeah. Sure. So all the three presentations, along with the critical comments offered by our discussant, Aparna, they are all open to question discussion. So I invite all those who are present. You can either put your questions in the chat box, or you can unmute and speak. Yes. Yeah, Savita Singh ji, please.
Yes. So I apologized. I've joined late. I could only listen to Khadija Mumtaz and your part of your comments that you're offering. But
okay. Yes, please go ahead.
So very glad that Aparna brought in her own site. About the imagination part, it's a very important category in literature, also in sociology, but we are talking about category of imagination in literature. So she insists, she underlined her own work as located and situated into an imagination and kind of a language within which she thought that the stories emerged. It is very important for writers also look at critically at their own writings in terms of how much they derive or depend on the social reality. And social reality, not only some sort of monolithic reality. We're talking about a reality that is structured and has many layers, a reality that constitutes you and you are constituted by that reality. Because a writer is a far more complex creature being than a social scientist, in my view. Because I do both and I know my two personalities very well. Why does she think that why did she emphasize on the imagination of language? I think her stories were address social reality where religion plays an oppressive role, I would say, in our country, just as caste does. Somebody's at my door, I'll just come in a minute.
Good. Cannot hear anything.
Oh, she's just gone to get the door. Somebody at the door. I'm waiting for her to finish the question so that I can ask my question. Or should I?
I think we can take the next question. She has more or less made her comment.
Yes. If there's someone else, I can.
Yeah, if there is somebody else with a question or a comment. Savita is
yes,
back.
I'm back.
Yeah, please.
So, please tell me, because I would love to know, why did you take this? It's a kind of a trope or a strategy.
Make it very brief, Savitaji. Could you make it brief? Because
yeah, just I wanted to know the fact that she uses imagination and she invokes language as the primary category of her creative writing.
No, that's the difference between history and literary work, I feel. That is, we have the freedom also. We can imagine the characters and we can talk through that character or their life, how they faced this historical period or that special social that is period or the social ideology which it comes. So I feel that there should be that is what is literature, no? That is, we are bringing imaginary characters and we try to talk about the social realities. It should be combined. That is I think that is the basis of literature. That is.
Yeah, that much, of course, you can do it. But you know, there's a tradition in literature where imagination is a very big category. It almost defines all fictional writing or all artistic writing. And so you are not invoking that kind of imagination. You are simply, it's a process, part of the process of writing. So there's, most writers would do that. If they're fiction writers, they would imagine their characters, even though those characters are very much part of the society. but it helps in constructing a new story, a new novel, a plot. That is, as a strategy, it is fine, but it is not your epistemic world where imagination creates everything, and which actually avoids, similitude or copying reality. Also this whole trend is there in literature. I suspect that you are not doing it. All right.
Okay, you can go through my works, no?
Yes, I will. I'm very happy that you come to our session, our colloquium.
Only one novel is translated to English, and you are, I feel you are a Punjabi or something, Punjabi?
No, I'm not a Punjabi. I am in Delhi at the moment.
Delhi.
Teaching, yeah. But I write in Hindi.
She's a poet herself. Maybe you should tell something more about your work.
Can we go to the next question?
Yeah.
If there are comments or questions, we will welcome that. On what is presented.
Yes, there's a Maninder wants to.
Yeah, I have one, but would you like to go first, Sujata, since you
No, please. No, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this session, Sujata. I think exposure to non-Hindi literature, non-Hindi Indian literature is extremely important. And we tend to read other languages like international languages, but forget to read our own languages. And Kerala is a fascinating place for me. And there are two issues I have. One, that, and continuing from Savita, since we are trying to see how far can we access literature to understand our social reality. Because literature is more complex, and as you rightly said, that it covers more grounds. Yes, it has an element of imagination, but imagination is also not something unreal. It remains within the real boundaries to an extent. So how far we can, as social scientists, we can draw upon literature for understanding our social reality. In social sciences generally, we are now particularly talking about evidence-based social science. So can we take literature as our evidence? This is one thing. Literature giving insight is widely accepted, but can we also take literature as an evidence? And you are the best person to tell us. Second thing that I found fascinating, and Kerala particularly attracts me, because Kerala inter-community relationship has been very different compared to Hindi heartland. And you made interesting point that when the couple went to Makkah and then realized that the real bond between them is due to the love that they have as human beings and the reason where they belong to. So between reason and religion, which one is kind of prioritized? That is very interesting thing. Maybe it is not prioritized between, maybe the inter-community relationship is mediated through regional experiences. And that mediation, I think, is extremely important, which we also saw in Kashmir, as we used to call it Kashmirian, which gradually broke down. And Kerala probably has now has started experiencing different kind of situation. So how do you look at the possibility of this complexity of relationship being expressed in literature and being in real life, transforming the possibility of declining the inter-community relationship? In a way, I'm suggesting, as the first speaker was saying, and that was very interesting thing to see, that how Dalit literature is not only documentation of experiences, but Dalit literature is also transforming Dalit society. It's a dialectical relationship between Dalit literature and society. So do you think similar dialectical relationship between your writings and the inter-community relationship? That's what I would like to know. Thank you.
Very good question, Manil.
First question was how much we can take it for granted, the reality which is described in the literary work, no? That, as you said, I think it is an insight which we get. And to some extent, as I mentioned that novel, Khair, we get the history also. That's a fact. The historical changes, the political changes which is occurring in the South Kerala, that we can take it as, to some extent, they are facts. But actually, we get an insight about the social reality through the novels. That is, when we read many novels, it may be picturizing the same social fact in a little different way. But we get, when we read all, we get an insight about the social reality, or even by reading one novel like Tagari's Khair, we get the social reality tasted by so many types of people differently. So from that, we get a realization about the social fact. That's all. And of course, I feel that we get facts also from big novels like this, probably from rather more than stories or poems, short stories or poems. From the novel, actually, we get many facts. But it should not be taken as granted. That is, I think even the history books, we cannot take it for granted now. No, isn't it? The history books, there will be the inclination, the social inclination, or the attitude of the writer will definitely influence the history books also. But here, I think it gives more insight and more realization of the social facts and the political condition rather than history books, I feel. That is my answer for the first question he asked. The second one, the inter-community relationship. Definitely, I think reading and writing, reading novels and reading stories, that will make, again, that's an insight. It is the intercultural or the regional culture which is binding us more rather than religion. That is a pan-Islamic culture that they couldn't aspire. That is, they are in the Saudi Arabia, that is in the holy city of Makkah, in the Barsa, the couple. But they find that it is not the Islam religion which is uniting them, but more than that, it is the local culture. So I feel that picturizing this local culture and the intercultural relationship actually is a resistance to the what I will say, the new nationalism, that is, which is having only one color, that is one samskaram, one bhasha. So it is a resistance when we picturize the regional culture and the relationship. This becomes actually a resistance to such types of that is what I will say, they are trying, that is to make only one culture. So this is something like a resistance, I feel. The writing and also reading such novels and stories will act like a resistance. I think.
Can I add something?
Okay.
Thank you for your very good answer. Sujata, could you ask your or offer your comment?
Yes, I think Dr. Sunil Krishnan also want to respond to the previous question. Would you like to?
Yeah. Regarding the first question about the evidence, how much we can rely on the work of fiction. It's like the difference between an autobiography and a history. So autobiography, you always have the subjective element. It may not be accurate historically. So fiction is in a way, it's like autobiography, subjective. But the difference between the subjective and the objective has been debated. The authenticity of the objective has to be put into the same purview of debate as we put the subjectivity. When we question the subjectivity, the same rigor must be applied to the objectivity. The Khadija ma'am also told about the historical narratives how narratives are being done according to historicity is being built upon. Okay, similarly, so when fiction is a subjective thing, so is history, but maybe in a smaller manner, much milder. This is what I want to add. So it offers some insight. We cannot take it as a evidence. No, it's not like it is against the spirit of literature, I thought.
Thank you. Sujata?
Yeah, I had a question for Dr. Sunil Krishnan. I am familiar with the little magazine tradition in Tamil that has been there for 30 years. In the initial period, a lot of European thinkers were translated, like Levi Strauss, Malinowski, Michel Foucault. Their works were translated and made available to a Tamil-speaking audience. Marx, in a very big way, there were many left-oriented people in the what is known as a little magazine circle, so they were right. So this I noticed that these kind of translations made that Tamil was not very readable. If you translate Levi Strauss and want to make it because the languages, the vocabulary have a certain structure. It is connected to forms of life, says Wittgenstein. So if you translate, when you create a work of fiction, you are still operating within the limits of that language, whatever freedom you have. But when you do a translation of a philosophy from another work, I know that you don't do that. But the little you are more in the creative realm, and even your writings are on Gandhi are your own understanding of how you look at Gandhi. But the had this issue, it has graduated addressing many issues. So I would like to know from you how you look at the role of translation, especially and what it does to Tamil reading. At least it makes the reading difficult compared to fiction.
Ravi Kumar sir was telling about this Nirapirigai. Nirapirigai was one of the pioneers who brought in these new thoughts from the Europe. There were SVR and Marx. There were some thinkers.
Can you please speak in the mic? I can't hear you.
Okay. So as the earliest panelist, Ravi Kumar, he had a little magazine. He was editor. He was part of the editorial of one little magazine, Nirapirigai, which is one of the pioneer magazines who brought about the European thoughts. Althusser and everyone, they were translated into Tamil. This created a huge furor in the initial period. What happened was, these concepts were misunderstood actually. And initially, the people who read the translations through that, and there was a proliferation of fake literature for a period of time. Conceptually following that. So they said that realism has come to an end, and this has come to an end, the modernism has come to an end, like that. So they tried to imitate that. Maybe they tried to imbibe and create some fiction, something like that. So that was happening for a period of time. And then again, so the writers broke free, and everything was happening naturally. I think the problem with the translating these works is that what is the context in Tamil, in the Tamil literary sphere. So without explaining, without creating a context, without understanding how the literary evolution has happened in Tamil, without understanding that, if we just bring or thrust something, say and show that, so this is what is happening, this is new, so it won't work. It does not work in that manner. So that is what has happened. But now the recent translations, some of the recent translations are coming out, and they are pretty much readable now, actually, thanks to plenty of technology. We have Google Translator and online dictionaries, etc. So now the translations are much better and much easier to read. And also our exposure to the international thought is also grown.
Can I ask one more question? Unless
Yes, please.
Yeah, we are nearing the time
Yes.
allotted. So maybe you can go ahead with one question.
One very quick question.
Yeah, sure.
To both Dr. Sunil Krishnan and Dr. Khatija, do you feel optimistic? From what you said, it seemed that you're optimistic that this literary sphere is doing good, or it's bound to expand, etc. I mean, would you stick to that? Your Marapachi Literary Circle in Karaikudi, you think it is bound to grow, expand? Do you have youngsters there?
Yes, I'm very optimistic about it because maybe I feel that this is one of the golden period for Tamil literature. Number of readers, a number of writers who have emerged in the past 10 or 15 years. But I do doubt that this may not continue after 10-15 years because this spur has been created by the digital, the digital market, digital reach has increased. But this is mostly returned by the people who are born in the 80s and the earlier part of 90s. So only when we come to know about the post 95, post liberalization era, when they start to read and write, then only we will know the real picture. Because I do sense that there is a decline in Tamil readership in that area. Now it is growing, but I don't know whether this growth will be it will continuously increase. I do have some doubts because we have to wait and watch.
We will have to stop the question and answer session here. I am sure all of you have the email IDs of the speakers. Please continue your dialogue with these writers. They all have wonderful insights into the major topic we are discussing today: truth, imagination, and ideology. And I'm sure a lot of things came up. I will take about 10 minutes. Sujata, is it okay? I'm all of you can hear me, I think.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes.
Sure. I am happy that social science department has taken up this question for discussion, because there is a tendency from the questions also, I could see this, to see the creative writer as a native informer. When you read literature for quote unquote evidence or for a kind of truthful mimetic report, you are actually misreading literature. Of course, misreading is also reading. The point I am making is literature is not ethnography. Literature is not ethnographic kind of representation. We are all embedded in a language. We are situated not in time and space alone. We are also situated in a language. So there is an embedded quality which actually imparts a certain dimension to the fictional or literary writing or poetic or dramatic, whatever you call it. You see, this comes through, for example, if I quote, if I am a Bengali, if somebody is actually singing a line from Tagore, that line itself will tell me much more than what a non-Bengali will ever understand. You see, what is the context in which such a song is sung, or what actually is the larger, significance of certain words which have gone into the making of the song. There is much more. There is much more into. So let's actually understand that these are embedded in the very structure of language. And the form-content relation itself, very often, this is what social scientists actually fail to grasp. Form itself is ideological. Form doesn't actually, Mikhail Bakhtin says, no sign is neutral. You see, no word actually. You see, words carry traces. Words carry you see, generations of meanings we may use in a particular sense, but it has a history. So words look back, words look ahead. So the form itself, when, for example, you use a particular maybe meter, chandas, if you're writing in an Indian language, or you may not use, but then you may use a certain tonality. Your words actually, you see, maybe there may be echoes. So it actually speaks back to the generic memory. You see, the poetry itself creates a certain kind of memory. And this Dr. Khadija Mumtaz did mention, you see, you can read a narrative against the grain. You can very well actually read it in a sense the author may never have actually meant it. You see, Conrad's Heart of Darkness has been read as a critique of colonialism. It can. We know, we read Prospero you see, and Caliban relation from Shakespeare's, you see, Shakespeare never heard of post-colonial situation. But a post-colonial situation can be read into the Tempest. So this actually what makes literature contemporary. Literature becomes contemporary because text actually are always, text have subtext, and many subtext keep actually its relation with the text keep changing. You see, in the latest issue of the Paris Review, there is a very interesting interview with the African writer, from Kenyan writer who wrote The Decolonization of the Mind. You see, I forget his name, I recall it. You see, he says, I am a Black person. I am an African. I don't look at your text or any literature the way a white man does. And he gives a very wonderful insight into Wuthering Heights. All of you may be knowing Wuthering Heights. And he says, when I look at Wuthering Heights, I know Heathcliff is an enigmatic character. But then he says Liverpool was a center of slave trade. And most probably Heathcliff must have been a slave, or his father must have been a slave. See, this is an insight you cannot get from an English critic. You cannot read Jane Austen without the history of the slave trade. But you can very well read it as a particular type of English novel, and you can you say explain, and as we very often do in the English classroom, as an example of a wonderful social realist novel of the 19th century or late 18th century. But then what I actually mean to argue was, these texts can be read against the grain. They can be read ideologically, because this is where the language it becomes ideological. They point in more than one direction. And this, you see, forms keep changing. In Malayalam novel, I am sure Dr. Khadija Mumtaz will agree with me. I've recently written an extended essay on what you call the transnational novel in Malayalam. We have K.R. Meera writing Aracha, Hang Woman, or we have Sarah Joseph writing Budhini. You see, these are not located in Kerala. We have T.D. Ramakrishnan writing, you see, Sugandhi, or you see, that novel is about the ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka. We have Benjamin, who has already won the international awards, the JCB Prize, etc., writing on the spring, the Arab Spring. See, why are readers in Kerala relating to this larger, world of what you call ethnic conflict in Kerala, or Budhini is the story of a Santal girl. I will not go into the novel itself, but the larger argument I am putting before you is literature has a certain inner dynamics, and its history may not actually parallel social history. Of course, this point has to be noted that Weidenheit and many people have argued history is fiction. Whatever is narrated cannot escape a certain fictional element. And this is what very often a sociologist also doesn't understand. When you create the picture of a village, you interview you translate what the native speakers speak. In all these, your situatedness, you are situated in a time and place, in a language, and a whole, this goes into the making of that narrative. So we cannot totally escape a certain, by saying fictional, I am not saying it is untrue. Fiction is an essential means of grasping the nature of truth. If there are no fictions, we will never actually understand the nature of truth. In any society, it's by telling stories that we know what we are. It is by relating to stories. The moment you stop telling stories, you actually cease to be a living person. We are all embedded in other stories as well. We are actually, Walter Benjamin says, those people who came back from world wars, they had no experience, quote unquote experience. They were silenced, because an experience becomes an experience only when it's narrated in language. Unless it enters narrative, unless it enters language, experience doesn't exist. It is through language that we actually discover experience. The question of imagination is much more complex. In fact, what globalization has done is to create imagination on such a huge scale that we are enveloped in the imaginative sweep of the capital or whatever. I mean, there are lots of things that people like Appadure says, is a world of flows or world of structures or whatever. You see, can you escape the imagination, the web of imagination created by the nation state? You see, once the nation state comes into being, all fictions become almost impossible because they monopolize fiction. They even, and that's why you can only question the nation state by creating alternative narratives continuously. Dr. Khadija Mumtaz did mention how the regional can resist a certain homogenization of the global. A very important point. I want to emphasize that. For example, what happens to the North Kerala Muslim community? They exist as a community. They don't exist as a religion. Islam in Kerala has a very different history than Islam in North India or Islam in other parts of India. So when you have a samudayam, you see, you may have Irava samudayam, or you may have Muslim samudayam, or you may have Christian samudayam. So communitarian narratives do not actually subscribe to the religious kind of ideological contrast or differences. And this is, you read, that's why a writer like Bashir is very important. Bashir again and again, talks about this communitarian bonding which has gone into the language. And that is very much an element which has characterized Malayalam language, its imagination. So there is a dimension of social imagination which shapes literature, whether it's poetry. For example, you only need a couple of words from Arabic Malayalam to create a certain, maybe, you see, ambience of life, a certain kind of historical relation between communities. Of course, I do accept that over the years, many of these idealistic kind of, in North India, again, Ganga Jamni kind of culture, you see, that's what Athagav is about. If some of you are aware of Athagav, it talks about how there was a kind of Hindu-Muslim bonding, which the idea of, you see, two-nation, or the idea of, you see, two-nation theory, gradually, you see, it breached that and created a larger kind of rift. Coming to the idea of translation, and with that I will wind up. You see, translation is something which we don't realize. It is built into the very nature of Indian languages. Indian languages were born in translation. You see, I very often quote the example of Sheldon Pollock, who has written the history of Sanskrit. 800 plus pages, huge tome, the language of gods. The index runs to 34 pages. You look for any sociological term, you'll find it. You will not find the word translation there. Why in the history of Sanskrit, the word translation doesn't figure? This is basically because Sanskrit did not translate, or whatever little they took, they made into their own. They never actually acknowledged it came from Prakrit or it came from, you see, many other. So, but look at any, from Assamese to Malayalam to Marathi to Tamil, you see, they have extensively translated Mahabharata, Ramayana to begin with, and they did not need Sanskrit. By 8th century, you can see the modern Indian languages have begun emerging and Sanskrit had begun declining. And by 15th century, most of the Indian languages are firmly in place. And this happens through continuous interaction. Translation is one way of grasping the other. I would actually borrow, you see, Sunil Krishnan's term. Like fiction, translation continuously reaches out to, it crosses boundary, translate, carry across. It crosses the boundary. You see, we should realize in India or maybe in the world, every 15 days, one language dies. There are about 600 plus Indian languages. Many are on the verge of death. When I was on an ACT team to JNU, one of the suggestions I had put before, I don't know whether it ever was circulated, that every thesis written in JNU in English should be translated into Indian languages. You see, maybe a great work, research work in sociology, but can't actually one essay be written in Hindi or Bengali? How many words from Indian languages have actually come into the vocabulary of sociology? You see, we keep endlessly repeating Homo erectus or things like hierarchicus. You see, is there a single word, even for caste, we will not, jadi means different. The moment you use Indian words, they look in different direction. Jadi is not caste. Madam is not religion. Narayana Guru will say, Madam only means, you say, your opinion. The whole idea, dharma again is not religion. Take 5 key words in your classroom, Indian words, and try to discuss what exactly, you see, they imply. And recently, Dilip Menon has been trying to actually do something of this, but it is too little, too late. We should have actually created, you see, a certain Indian languages are not for creating database, not creating the native informer. They are imagining the reality. You see, reality is always imagined. Look at the advertisements you are watching every day. The globalization invests so much in, you see, the capturing your imagination. You are living the fantasy of the global world. You see, this global, how can you resist that? You see, read a novel like Punachi by, you see, Perumal Murugan, or read Buthini by, there is an attempt to resist a kind of imagination, the fantasy created by, and that's where the idea of truth becomes, the claims to truth are what actually are to be contested. There are too many claims to truth in the post-truth world we are living in. Globalization continuously appeals to wonderful kinds of claims to truth. And that's where fiction, more than ever, fiction has become our, extremely important. It includes, for me, fiction includes poetry, drama, any imaginative literature. For want of time, I will not, because I am familiar with at least 2-3 languages in India, and literature of at least three or 4 languages. So I do know at the ground level, the literatures in Indian languages are continuously challenging the fantasies which are in circulation. They are actually challenging the kind of curricula which have created, our curricula are largely determined in the class, academia in the metropolitan cities. You see, our curricula have very little to do with the lived reality. Now, by using the word global south or post-colonial, we don't make it relevant to us. The whole question, I know Gopal Guru and Sarukai has discussed this question, how do we sort of create a certain social science which can be responsive to the everyday reality lived by the Indian, the students in the Indian classroom. The challenge should begin by us, accepting that literature has to be, assimilated into the larger. Why not at least a few? Now you have the translations of Teri Gatha, Buddhist nuns, or you have all narratives from many Indian languages. Translation has given us a very rich body of Indian literature. Why not use that corpus? Why not use some of the text? And you put some of the concepts in the classroom along with these texts. Take one short story, like the one our Sulishil Krishnan has actually mentioned. Wonderful. You can talk about ethnic conflict, but when you read a short story of this kind, the whole issue becomes much more urgent, and it cannot be easily put into sociological terms. There are I would conclude by saying this discussion should continue, truth, imagination, ideology, and there should be greater emphasis on the manner in which literature contributes to the contestation of the kind of ideological fantasies which are all the while being radiated to us by the nation state, by the transnational capital, by institutional kind of locations. So maybe it is the power of imagination as manifested by these literary pieces that actually will help us decipher how we need to move ahead to configure truth. Truth is something, not a destination. Truth is something which actually will take us on another journey. All these words, I would say, they are words with neither imagination, nor truth, nor ideology can be seen as a conclusive kind of frame. They are moving frames, they are movable frames. They keep actually shifting. They all the while keep shifting. And as our speakers have very clearly, 70s to 80s, 80s to, I began writing in Malayalam sometime in the 70s. And when I read the short stories being written today, the question of climate change, question of environment, much before an essay was written in the environmental studies on climate change, some of the short story writers in Kerala were talking about the change in the environment. And including Bashir, Bhumiyude Avakashigal, who are the inheritors of the earth, written almost, even in this week I saw twice, Malayalam newspaper quoting the title of his short story. So if we actually assimilate these, there is a kind of wisdom in many of these works. We need to actually, I have a number of writers to mention, but I will stop here. And thank you, Sujata, for thinking about this very, very urgent, I would say it actually is one of the requirements now the university system in India faces. And maybe many such exercises will give you a clear roadmap how to move ahead. Hope this session was useful. I find it a learning experience. I learned from all the three. And thank you all very much for listening, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Tushala, you want to wind up?
I think it was brilliant. Very, very enlightening, very much in the spirit of our colloquium.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
In fact,
Tushala, you to make an announcement, Tushala.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would like to thank all the panelists and chairperson for such an insightful session. We learn very much. We learn from this session about the things that we as Hindi-speaking people don't know much. And I'm thankful to the Credit Theory Association for giving me this opportunity. And I'm thankful to especially Manindra sir for giving me this opportunity. And now I would like to thank all of you for joining this session, and thank you.
And our next session, you want to make an announcement, Dipanchika?
Yes, sir. We have it at 8 o'clock, so that's we have a break until then. It's a round table.
Your voice is not clear, echoing.
Thank you, Sujata, and your team. We will keep in touch.
Yes, thank you very much for being there, and we'll keep in touch. This can be seen as a beginning, not as an end.
This dialogue should continue. All this dialogue should continue, and I am very grateful to very insightful presentations were made today by all the three, Sushil, Krishnan, Khadija ji.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have another session from 8 to, is it 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
Yeah, 8 to 9:30.
9:30. And that will be a roundtable on dialogue between creative theory and critical theory. How critical theory should become more creative. That's the title.
Okay.
So this is the end of the 3 days session. So we will kind of reflect back on what we have discussed. So please join that.
Please, yeah, try to have it right.
And
Thank you. Thank you.
Krishnan,
Yes.
most welcome to join us at Chandrabhaga Poetry Festival at last year.